8th of March, 1968. Pacific Ocean, northwest of Hawaii. A Gulf II class submarine holds its patrol depth. 3 R-21 ballistic missiles secured in vertical tubes behind the sail. Each warhead carries roughly 1 megaton yield, enough to erase a city. At 0500 hours Moscow time, the last scheduled radio contact passes without incident. Background static, routine acknowledgement, then silence. Soviet Pacific Fleet Command expects the next transmission in 12 hours. It never arrives. By the 11th of March, search aircraft crisscross empty coordinates. No debris, no oil slick, no distress beacon. The official Soviet naval log will record only loss of contact. 3 words that conceal a nuclear payload resting in 16,000 feet of water. What Soviet admirals did not know was that American hydrophones had already heard the hull implode, and what neither side knew was that this loss would trigger the most expensive covert salvage operation in Cold War history. The K-129 belonged to the Soviet Pacific Fleet's 15th Submarine Division, based at Rybachi Naval Base on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Commissioned in 1965, she was a diesel-electric boat retrofitted with ballistic missile tubes, a Gulf II class vessel designed to patrol within striking range of American cities. Her nuclear reactor, the OK-150, generated enough steam to drive twin screws and power onboard systems for extended deployments. Soviet designers intended these boats as a second strike deterrent. If land-based missiles were destroyed, submarines would deliver retaliation. By 1968, K-129 had completed several deterrent patrols. Crew rotation followed standard cycles. Maintenance logs from Rybachi documented routine overhauls, including reactor coolant checks and missile guidance calibrations. The submarine's captain held the rank of Captain Second Rank, equivalent to commander in Western navies, and oversaw a crew of 83 officers, enlisted men, and missile technicians. Soviet Pacific Fleet orders required Gulf-class boats to maintain radio silence, except during scheduled communication windows, minimizing detection risk. The 3 R-21 missiles aboard K-129 each measured 14 meters in length and carried a single nuclear warhead. Range, 2,500 kilometers. Guidance, inertial, with mid-course updates possible via periscope star sights. Soviet naval doctrine emphasized reliability over accuracy. The warhead's yield compensated for any targeting error. Launch procedures required the submarine to surface, raise the missiles to vertical, and fire within minutes. The crew trained on these sequences monthly. In early March 1968, K-129 departed Rybachi for a standard 70-day patrol. Soviet naval intelligence assessed American carrier activity in the Western Pacific and positioned submarines accordingly. K-129's patrol zone lay northeast of Midway Island, far from Soviet territorial waters, but within missile range of targets along the US west coast. Weather reports noted normal conditions, moderate seas, scattered cloud cover. The submarine carried provisions for 90 days, standard diesel fuel reserves, and full torpedo loadout. Soviet Fleet Headquarters expected K-129 to maintain scheduled radio contact every 12 hours using encrypted burst transmissions. These brief signals confirmed the boat's operational status without revealing precise location. American signals intelligence monitored Soviet naval frequencies, but rarely intercepted complete transmissions. Encryption and brevity ensured operational security. The 5th of March contact passed without incident, so did the 7th. On the 8th, at 0500 Moscow time, K-129 transmitted her last acknowledgement. 12 hours later, Fleet Headquarters received only static. Soviet naval procedure required investigation after 2 missed contacts. By the 10th of March, Pacific Fleet Command dispatched Il-38 maritime patrol aircraft to K-129's projected position. Pilots flew expanding square patterns, scanning for periscope wake, oil slick, or floating wreckage. Weather remained clear, visibility exceeded 10 kilometers. Search aircraft found empty ocean. No distress buoy surfaced, no radio beacon activated. Soviet submarines carried emergency systems designed to release marker buoys automatically if the hull exceeded crush depth. K-129's buoys never deployed, or deployed too deep to reach the surface. By the 12th of March, the Soviet Navy expanded search operations. Surface vessels joined the hunt, deploying towed sonar arrays and dragging the seabed with grapples. The search area covered over 500,000 square kilometers, an expanse larger than the Black Sea. Soviet admirals faced a paradox. K-129 had vanished without trace, yet her absence told them precisely what had happened. Submarines do not simply disappear, they sink. The question was where? Soviet naval intelligence reviewed K-129's patrol orders, calculating drift from known currents and submarine speed. Analysis suggested the boat might have traveled farther east than initially assumed, placing her final position closer to American-monitored waters. This introduced a complication, searching two openly risk-revealing Soviet patrol patterns to US reconnaissance satellites. Soviet search operations therefore proceeded cautiously, balancing operational security against the urgency of locating a sunken nuclear submarine carrying classified missile technology. Meanwhile, 6,000 kilometers away, US naval intelligence had already detected K-129's loss. The sound surveillance system, known as SOSUS, consisted of underwater hydrophone arrays positioned along the Pacific seabed, designed to track Soviet submarine movements. On the 8th of March, at 11 hours 47 minutes Universal Time, SOSUS stations in the Central Pacific recorded a sharp, acoustic signature, a prolonged metallic crunch consistent with hull implosion at extreme depth. The signal's intensity suggested catastrophic structural failure. Analysts triangulated the source to a position approximately 2,000 kilometers northwest of Hawaii, in waters exceeding 5,000 meters deep. American operators did not immediately recognize the signal's significance. SOSUS recorded thousands of transient sounds daily: whales, underwater volcanic activity, seismic events. Only after cross-referencing the timestamp with known Soviet submarine deployments did analysts conclude they had heard K-129's death. By the 15th of March, US Navy intelligence had compiled a preliminary report identifying the acoustic event as a probable submarine loss. The report noted the absence of explosion signatures. Whatever destroyed K-129 had not involved torpedo or missile detonation. The hull had simply imploded under pressure, suggesting either flooding or depth control failure. US naval intelligence faced a decision: inform the Soviets of the suspected loss or exploit the information for strategic advantage. Revealing SOSUS capabilities risked compromising one of America's most valuable intelligence assets. The Soviet Navy would immediately alter communication protocols and patrol routes if they knew American hydrophones could detect submarine movements across entire ocean basins. Yet withholding the information meant a Soviet nuclear submarine, carrying 3 live warheads, lay on the ocean floor, location unknown to its own Navy. By late March, US analysts had refined K-129's probable position to a circle approximately 15 kilometers in diameter. The depth, over 5,000 meters, exceeded any contemporary salvage capability. Commercial offshore drilling reached barely 300 meters. Military salvage vessels managed perhaps 600. Recovering an intact submarine from abyssal depths was technically impossible with existing technology, yet the intelligence value was extraordinary. Soviet ballistic missile submarines represented the backbone of Moscow's nuclear deterrent. Examining K-129's reactor design, missile guidance systems, communication encryption, and hull construction would provide insights worth billions in defense spending. The Central Intelligence Agency began preliminary assessments in April 1968. Initial feasibility studies concluded that recovering the entire submarine was impractical, but retrieving select components, specifically the missile tubes and coding machines, might be achievable with purpose-built equipment. The project would require designing deep-sea lifting mechanisms, constructing a specialized recovery vessel, and conducting the operation without Soviet detection. Estimated cost, several $100 million. Estimated timeline, 5 to 7 years. Soviet search operations continued through April and May. Pacific Fleet vessels expanded their grid, eventually searching areas over 1,000 kilometers from K-129's last reported position. No wreckage was found. By June, the Soviet Navy officially declared K-129 lost with all hands. Families received notification that their husbands, sons, and brothers had perished in an operational accident at sea. The exact nature of the accident remained classified. Even crew families received no details. Soviet naval regulations prohibited disclosure of submarine locations, patrol routes, or operational circumstances. The official Soviet conclusion, documented in classified naval reports later obtained by Western intelligence, attributed K-129's loss to catastrophic mechanical failure. Investigators theorized that a battery explosion, a known hazard in diesel-electric submarines, might have flooded the forward compartments, causing the boat to exceed crush depth before crew could surface or eject emergency buoys. This explanation fit available evidence. No distress transmission, no debris, no survivors. The Soviet Navy implemented new battery safety protocols across the submarine fleet and ordered enhanced emergency beacon systems for future boats. Neither the Soviet Navy nor its American counterpart publicly acknowledged K-129's loss. Soviet practice held that submarine movements remained state secrets even after a boat sank. American intelligence maintained silence to protect SOSUS. For the families of 83 Soviet sailors, the only certainty was absence. In 1969, the Central Intelligence Agency formally initiated Project Azorian, named after the Azores Islands, though the operation would occur nowhere near them. The mission objective: recover sections of K-129 from the Pacific seabed, specifically targeting the missile compartment and forward hull containing cryptographic equipment. CIA analysts estimated that even partial recovery would reveal Soviet missile technology, nuclear warhead design, and communication codes. The intelligence gain would justify extraordinary expense. The primary challenge was depth. K-129 rested 5,100 meters below the surface, 10 times deeper than conventional salvage limits. Water pressure at that depth exceeded 500 atmospheres, sufficient to crush standard steel like aluminum foil. Any recovery system would need to withstand immense pressure, lift thousands of tons, and operate in total darkness with minimal direct human control. CIA engineers consulted with Hughes Tool Company, an aerospace contractor experienced in designing complex mechanical systems. Together they conceived a solution: a massive surface vessel equipped with a retractable claw capable of grasping the submarine's hull. The claw, officially called a capture vehicle, would descend on a heavy lift pipe string, close around K-129's midsection, and haul the wreckage to the surface in sections. The system required hydraulic mechanisms, redundant control systems, and structural members capable of supporting loads exceeding 3,000 tons. To construct the capture vehicle, Hughes Tool would need a specialized ship. Conventional salvage vessels lack the deck space, lifting capacity, and stability required for deep ocean operations. CIA planners proposed building a purpose-designed recovery ship under civilian cover. The vessel would ostensibly serve as a deep-sea mining platform, harvesting manganese nodules from the ocean floor. This cover story provided plausible justification for a ship equipped with heavy-lift derricks, dynamic positioning systems, and a hull opening, the moon pool, through which the capture vehicle would descend. The design called for a ship 188 meters long, displacing over 50,000 tons, powered by diesel-electric generators producing sufficient electricity to run the lifting winches and hydraulic pumps. The vessel would incorporate a centerline well extending from the deck to below the waterline, allowing the capture vehicle to be lowered and raised without exposure to weather. Crew accommodations would house over 100 personnel: ship's crew, CIA operatives, engineers, and Navy specialists. Estimated construction cost: $350 million, equivalent to several billion in later decades. The US government approved funding through black budget appropriations, routing payments through cover corporations to obscure the CIA's involvement. Hughes Tool Company received contracts to design the ship and capture vehicle, with construction scheduled to begin in 1970. Cover story dissemination began immediately. Trade publications reported Hughes's interest in deep-sea mining, with press releases describing plans for a revolutionary mining vessel. The recovery vessel, named Glomar Explorer, began construction in 1970 at Sun Shipbuilding and dry dock in Chester, Pennsylvania. Shipyard workers installed massive diesel generators, hydraulic systems, and the distinctive derrick tower that would become the ship's defining feature. The derrick rose over 70 meters above the main deck, supporting hoisting machinery capable of lifting 8,000 tons. roughly the weight of K-129's midsection when waterlogged. The capture vehicle itself required 2 years to design and build. Engineers fabricated a steel cage measuring approximately 25 meters long and 12 meters wide, fitted with articulated claws that could close around the submarine's hull. Hydraulic rams provided closing force. Redundant systems ensured the claws would lock even if primary hydraulics failed. The entire assembly weighed over 2,000 tons and hung from a pipe string constructed from custom-manufactured sections, each 3 meters in diameter and capable of withstanding the compressive and tensile loads imposed by deep ocean operations. Testing presented unique challenges. No facility could simulate conditions at 5,000-meter depth. Engineers relied on scale models, computational analysis, and stepwise testing of individual components. Hydraulic systems underwent pressure testing to 800 atmospheres, 50% above operational requirements. Structural welds received ultrasonic inspection to detect microscopic flaws. Even small defects could propagate into catastrophic failures under deep ocean stress. While Glomar Explorer took shape, CIA operatives refined operational plans. The mission would require approximately 6 weeks on station, 2 weeks for site survey and positioning, 3 weeks for lowering and securing the capture vehicle, and 1 week for the lift itself. Weather windows in the target area permitted operations from June through September, when Pacific storms remained infrequent. Mission planners scheduled the attempt for summer 1974, allowing time for shakedown cruises and system validation. The CIA also prepared contingency measures for Soviet detection. If Soviet ships approached during recovery operations, Glomar Explorer crew would claim they were conducting manganese nodule mining trials. The cover story included actual mining equipment, bucket-line dredges, ore processing machinery, and sample nodules stored aboard. Press kits described Hughes Tool Company's investment in ocean mineral resources and the ship's revolutionary design. The cover was sufficiently plausible that several oceanographic institutes expressed interest in chartering Glomar Explorer for legitimate research once mining trials concluded. By 1973, Glomar Explorer completed sea trials off the California coast. Engineers tested dynamic positioning, the computerized system that held the ship stationary using bow and stern thrusters, and practiced deploying the capture vehicle to depths of several hundred meters. These trials revealed minor issues, hydraulic leaks, computer glitches, and wear on pipestring threads. Engineers corrected deficiencies and certified the ship ready for operational deployment. In March 1974, Glomar Explorer departed Long Beach, California, ostensibly bound for mining trials near Hawaii. Aboard were 178 personnel, ship's crew, Hughes engineers, CIA case officers, and Navy technical specialists. The ship carried sufficient fuel and provisions for 90 days at sea. As Glomar Explorer steamed west, few aboard knew the mission's true objective. Compartmentalized security ensured that only senior officers understood they were sailing to recover a Soviet submarine. Glomar Explorer arrived at the target coordinates in early July 1974. The site lay approximately 2,000 kilometers northwest of Hawaii in international waters beyond any nation's territorial claim. Ocean depth measured 5,095 meters by sonar. The ship activated dynamic positioning using seabed transponders and computerized thrusters to maintain station within 10 meters of the designated point. Survey operations began immediately. Glomar Explorer deployed a towed video sled equipped with floodlights and cameras, conducting multiple passes over the wreck site. Video footage confirmed K-129's position. The submarine lay in 2 main sections, the forward hull separated from the aft section near frame 90. The missile compartment remained attached to the forward section, though one of the 3 missile tubes had broken open, exposing the interior. Silt covered much of the wreckage, indicating the submarine had rested undisturbed for over 6 years. Engineers calculated that lifting the entire forward section, including the missile compartment, control room and forward torpedo room, would require hoisting approximately 2,000 tons of waterlogged metal. The capture vehicle's design capacity reached 3,000 tons, providing adequate margin. However, structural analysis revealed a problem. K-129's hull had corroded significantly, weakened by pressure and saltwater exposure. Closing the capture vehicle's claws might crush weakened sections, causing the hull to fragment. Despite concerns, CIA leadership authorized the lift. On the 12th of July, Glomar Explorer began lowering the capture vehicle. Descent proceeded at 15 meters per minute, requiring over 5 hours to reach the seabed. Engineers monitored pipestring stress, hydraulic pressure, and positioning data. The capture vehicle's floodlights illuminated K-129's hull as it settled into position around the submarine's midsection. Hydraulic systems activated, slowly closing the claws. At 50% claw closure, resistance increased. Sensors detected lateral movement. K-129's weakened hull was deforming under pressure. Engineers reduced hydraulic force, hoping to avoid structural collapse. The claws locked and lifting commenced. Hoisting machinery wound in the pipe string at approximately 10 meters per minute. Tension gauges showed normal loads. For the first 12 hours, the lift proceeded without incident. At depth, 1,400 meters, roughly 3,000 meters above the seabed, the capture vehicle's load suddenly decreased. Telemetry indicated structural failure. A large section of K-129's hull had broken away, falling back to the ocean floor. Engineers estimated that approximately 2/3 of the forward section remained secured in the claws. The aft section, including the reactor compartment and propulsion systems, had separated entirely. Hoisting continued despite the loss. After 5 days of continuous lifting, the capture vehicle entered Glomar Explorer's moonpool, bringing with it approximately 60 meters of K-129's bow and a portion of the missile compartment. Recovery teams found the section heavily damaged. Seawater had flooded all internal spaces, equipment corroded beyond recognition. However, critical items remained: one intact R-21 missile, code machines from the communication room, and the remains of 6 Soviet sailors, still at their duty stations after 6 years underwater. CIA personnel photographed everything, cataloguing each item before removing it for transport to US intelligence facilities. Intelligence analysts immediately recognized the recovered material's value. The R-21 missile, though damaged, provided complete diagrams of Soviet guidance technology. Engineers disassembled the inertial platform, documenting gyroscope design, accelerometer precision, and computational algorithms. Soviet missile guidance lagged American systems by approximately 5 years, a revelation that confirmed US strategic advantages in accuracy. The code machines yielded even greater insight. Soviet submarines used rotor-based encryption devices similar to Cold War-era Enigma machines, but with modifications that complicated Western decryption efforts. Recovering actual hardware allowed CIA cryptanalysts to reconstruct encryption algorithms and potentially read archived Soviet naval communications intercepts. The intelligence gain extended beyond K-129. Understanding Soviet encryption informed signals intelligence operations throughout the Pacific Fleet. Examining the reactor compartment section proved impossible. That portion had fallen away during the lift. However, metallurgical analysis of hull samples revealed Soviet construction techniques. The steel showed higher sulfur content than American submarine-grade alloys, suggesting lower fracture toughness. This explained K-129's catastrophic implosion, a hull crack propagating rapidly under pressure, flooding the boat before crew could react. American submarine designers modified hull specifications based on these findings, improving fracture resistance in future boats. The 6 recovered bodies received military burial at sea. CIA protocol required respectful treatment of Soviet military dead, and a Navy chaplain conducted services according to Russian Orthodox tradition. Each sailor was sewn into a weighted shroud and buried with Soviet naval honors. Film footage of the ceremony was classified but later released, showing American sailors saluting as Soviet crewmen returned to the Pacific. CIA estimates valued the recovered intelligence at several $billion in avoided research costs. Understanding Soviet missile technology, encryption systems, and submarine construction accelerated American defense programs and identified vulnerabilities in Soviet strategic forces. The operation's $350 million cost represented exceptional return on investment. However, the mission's partial success created a dilemma. The aft section, containing the nuclear reactor, additional code machines, and possibly 2 intact missiles, remained on the seabed. CIA planners debated a second recovery attempt. Glomar Explorer could return, using the capture vehicle to retrieve the aft section. But the first operation had barely remained secret. A second mission increased detection risk. Soviet intelligence had noted Glomar Explorer's presence in the area, though they appeared to accept the mining trial's cover story. Returning would invite closer scrutiny. Additionally, the capture vehicle had sustained damage during the first lift. Hydraulic seals leaked, structural members showed stress fractures, and corrosion from saltwater exposure required extensive refurbishment. Engineers estimated that repairs would require 18 months and cost tens of millions. The CIA weighed expense against intelligence value and concluded that a second mission was not justified. K-129's aft section would remain where it lay. Yet the operation's secrecy unraveled faster than anticipated. In February 1975, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh published details of Project Azorian in the New York Times. The article described Glomar Explorer, the capture vehicle, and the CIA's recovery of K-129 wreckage. Public reaction mixed shock with admiration. Shock that such an audacious operation had occurred in secret, and admiration for the engineering achievement. The Soviet Union officially protested, claiming the operation violated international law. The US government declined comment, neither confirming nor denying the story. Soviet officials had suspected American involvement in K-129's fate since 1974, when reconnaissance satellites photographed Glomar Explorer operating in the submarine's vicinity. However, the ship's mining cover story provided plausible deniability, and Soviet leadership hesitated to escalate tensions over unconfirmed suspicions. The New York Times article removed all ambiguity. Soviet diplomatic protests cited international maritime law, arguing that K-129 remained sovereign Soviet property regardless of its location on the ocean floor. The Soviet Union demanded return of all recovered materials, including the bodies of the 6 sailors. The US State Department responded that the bodies had been buried at sea with military honors. True, though not revealing what else had been recovered. Washington neither confirmed nor denied possession of submarine wreckage, maintaining official silence while tacitly acknowledging the operation's occurrence. Soviet internal assessments, later obtained from archived documents, revealed significant concern. Military analysts calculated that if the United States possessed K-129's code machines, then years of encrypted naval communications might be compromised. The Soviet Navy immediately changed all encryption protocols, updated submarine communication procedures, and modified patrol routes. This sudden operational shift disrupted Soviet strategic planning and required retraining across the entire submarine fleet. The intelligence loss extended beyond K-129's technology to operational security compromised by American cryptanalysis. Soviet press coverage remained minimal. State-controlled media briefly mentioned the incident as an example of American imperialism, but avoided details that might reveal Soviet submarine capabilities or vulnerabilities. The Soviet public learned little beyond vague acknowledgments of a Cold War intelligence incident. Families of K-129's crew received no additional information. Official records continued to state only that the submarine was lost at sea in an operational accident. American press coverage, by contrast, intensified. Additional articles detailed Glomar Explorer's construction, the capture vehicle's design, and estimated mission costs. Congressional committees demanded CIA testimony, questioning whether such expensive covert operations required legislative oversight. CIA Director William Colby defended the mission, arguing that the recovered intelligence justified the expense and that operational security required presidential-level classification. Congress ultimately agreed, though debates over covert action oversight continued for years. The term Glomar response entered legal vocabulary following the case. When journalists filed Freedom of Information Act requests seeking CIA documents about K-129, the agency responded that it could neither confirm nor deny the existence of such records. Courts upheld this response as legally valid when confirming or denying would itself reveal classified information. The phrase became standard government practice for handling classified-related inquiries. Public fascination with Project Azorian extended beyond intelligence circles. Engineers marveled at the deep ocean salvage technology. The capture vehicle represented a significant advance in underwater engineering. Oceanographers recognized applications for deep-sea research. The mission demonstrated that abyssal depths were accessible with sufficient funding and technical innovation, opening possibilities for scientific exploration and resource recovery. Yet the most enduring legacy was strategic. Project Azorian demonstrated that even the ocean floor offered no absolute sanctuary. Soviet submarines could no longer assume that sinking meant permanent concealment. This realization influenced submarine design, reactor safety protocols, and scuttling procedures. If a boat sank, its technology might eventually reach adversary hands. Project Azorian's revelations cascaded through American and Soviet submarine programs. US Navy metallurgists applied lessons from K-129's hull failure to improve American submarine construction. Steel specifications changed, requiring lower sulfur content and higher fracture toughness. New hull sections underwent more rigorous testing, including full pressure simulation in specialized chambers. These modifications increased submarine construction costs by approximately 15%, but significantly improved safety margins at depth. Soviet submarine design evolved differently. Rather than improving hull metallurgy, a time-consuming and expensive process, Soviet engineers focused on emergency systems. New submarines received enhanced distress beacons capable of releasing from greater depths, multiple redundant communication systems, and escape capsules designed to withstand pressure at typical patrol depths. These changes reflected Soviet naval philosophy: accept certain technical limitations, but provide crew with survival alternatives if systems failed. Intelligence agencies on both sides refined deep ocean surveillance. The US Navy expanded SOSUS coverage, adding hydrophone arrays in previously unmonitored regions. Soviet naval intelligence developed countermeasures, including quieter propulsion systems and operations in deeper water, where acoustic detection became more difficult. The underwater technology race accelerated, driven partly by K-129's example. If a submarine could be found and raised, then concealment became paramount. The operation also influenced international maritime law. Soviet legal scholars argued that Project Azorian violated conventions protecting sunken military vessels as sovereign territory. Western counterarguments cited salvage rights in international waters. The debate remained unresolved, but subsequent international agreements addressed submarine salvage explicitly. Naval powers agreed that recovery operations targeting sunken military vessels required notification and consent from the vessel's nation of origin, a provision directly prompted by the K-129 incident. Economic implications extended beyond defense budgets. Hughes Tool Company's deep-sea mining cover story, though fictional in K-129's case, attracted genuine interest from mineral extraction companies. The technology developed for Project Azorian demonstrated feasibility of deep-ocean mining, and several companies invested in similar equipment for harvesting manganese nodules. By the 1980s, deep-sea mining had evolved from cover story to legitimate industry, with multiple nations operating recovery vessels in international waters. Glomar Explorer herself became surplus after the operation. The Navy briefly considered using the ship for oceanographic research, but operating costs exceeded budgets. In 1977, Glomar Explorer was mothballed, then later converted for offshore oil drilling. The capture vehicle was disassembled and stored in classified facilities. Decades later, portions of the equipment appeared in maritime museums, labeled only as experimental deep-sea salvage technology, technically accurate but omitting context. The 6 Soviet sailors buried at sea in 1974 received posthumous recognition in 1992. Following the Soviet Union's dissolution, the Russian Federation requested information about K-129 casualties. CIA officials provided limited details and offered to share the burial ceremony footage. Russian naval authorities accepted, and in a quiet ceremony, K-129's crew received formal honors from their successor government. The gesture acknowledged shared humanity despite decades of conflict. By the 1990s, Cold War secrecy began lifting. The Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991 removed strategic justifications for maintaining classification on many Cold War operations. CIA historians argued that Project Azorian, though once highly sensitive, no longer posed security risks if properly documented. In 1992, the agency authorized limited declassification, releasing sanitized documents describing the operation's scope and technical achievements while protecting specific intelligence products. Declassified materials confirmed what journalists had reported in 1975, but added technical detail. Documents described the capture vehicle's design, Glomar Explorer's specifications, and operational timelines. They acknowledged recovering portions of K-129 and obtaining intelligence value, but omitted specifics about code machines or missile technology. The release satisfied historians seeking operational details while preserving protection for intelligence methods. Academic analyses followed declassification. Naval historians assessed Project Azorian within broader Cold War submarine operations, noting its uniqueness. No comparable recovery operation had occurred before or since. The combination of depth, secrecy, and technical ambition remained unmatched. Engineering journals published retrospective analyses of the capture vehicle and deep ocean lifting systems, crediting Project Azorian with advancing salvage technology by decades. Russian historians offered different perspectives. Accessing Soviet naval archives after 1991, researchers reconstructed K-129's final patrol from departure logs and communication records. Their analysis suggested the submarine suffered a battery explosion, consistent with the original Soviet investigation, causing rapid flooding and implosion before the crew could react. Russian researchers noted that similar incidents had occurred in other submarines, though none involved ballistic missile boats in international waters. Debate emerged over Project Azorian's ethics. Critics argued that recovering K-129 violated maritime conventions protecting military graves. The 6 bodies brought to the surface represented 83 sailors entombed in the wreck. Raising portions of their ship disturbed a war grave. Defenders countered that intelligence imperatives justified the operation, that recovered sailors received proper burial, and that the aft section containing most casualties remained undisturbed on the seabed. The financial cost drew scrutiny. $350 million in 1970s currency equated to several billion in early 21st century terms. Critics questioned whether intelligence gain justified such expense, particularly given the operation's partial success. CIA officials maintained that recovered cryptographic intelligence alone repaid costs by revealing Soviet communication vulnerabilities. Submarine technology insights provided bonus value. From this perspective, Project Azorian represented cost-effective intelligence collection. Comparisons with other intelligence operations highlighted Project Azorian's distinctiveness. Unlike espionage relying on human sources or signals intercepts, Project Azorian physically recovered hardware from hostile territory, or rather, from international waters containing hardware of hostile origin. The operation combined engineering, intelligence analysis, and operational security on unprecedented scale. Its success demonstrated that technical audacity could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. By 2000, Project Azorian had entered intelligence folklore, the operation that recovered a Soviet submarine from the Pacific floor using a ship built ostensibly for mining. Textbooks cited it as an example of covert action's potential and limitations. The operation succeeded technically but not strategically. Partial recovery provided valuable intelligence without fully satisfying mission objectives. This nuanced outcome reflected intelligence work's reality. Rarely complete success, rarely total failure, usually partial achievement amid constraints. K-129's loss added one more data point to a growing concern: nuclear reactors and warheads on the ocean floor. By the early 2000s, multiple submarines from various nations had sunk with reactors or weapons aboard. K-129 carried 3 nuclear warheads and a nuclear reactor, all resting at 5,100 meters depth. The aft section, never recovered, remained on the seabed with the reactor compartment intact but flooded. Environmental monitoring provided partial reassurance. Oceanographic surveys conducted in the 1980s and 90s measured radiation levels near K-129's wreck site. Detectors found activity slightly above background but well below hazardous thresholds. The submarine's reactor, shut down at the moment of sinking, contained relatively low fission product inventory compared to an operating reactor. Seawater flooding had cooled residual decay heat, preventing fuel melt. Corrosion proceeded slowly at abyssal depth. Cold temperatures and high pressure inhibited oxidation. Scientists estimated the reactor would remain structurally intact for decades, perhaps centuries, before corroding sufficiently to release significant radioactivity. The warheads posed different concerns. Nuclear weapons contain plutonium, or highly enriched uranium surrounded by chemical explosives. Seawater intrusion could corrode fissile material containment, potentially releasing plutonium into the marine environment. However, weapons-grade plutonium corrodes slowly in cold, low-oxygen conditions. Monitoring indicated minimal plutonium release through 2010. Models predicted that significant release would not occur until after 2050, when corrosion finally breached primary containment. International agreements addressed sunken nuclear material following K-129 and similar incidents. The London Convention on Ocean Dumping prohibited deliberate disposal of radioactive waste at sea, but did not cover accidental losses. Naval powers agreed to monitor sunken submarines and notify nearby nations of potential hazards. These protocols reflected lessons learned. Even submarines lost in international waters could affect coastal nations if radioactivity leaked. The K-129 precedent also influenced submarine decommissioning procedures. Nuclear navies developed protocols for safely removing reactors and warheads before scrapping submarines, ensuring that future losses would not involve nuclear material. These procedures required significant investment. Reactor removal cost millions per submarine, but eliminated future ocean floor contamination risks. Cold War submarine losses totaled 8 Soviet boats and 2 American boats, most carrying nuclear reactors. K-129 remained unique as the only ballistic missile submarine lost in deep international waters with warheads aboard. Other losses occurred in shallower coastal waters or involved attack submarines without strategic weapons. This distinction made K-129 a permanent case study in nuclear security, a worst-case scenario that fortunately resulted in minimal environmental impact due to depth and isolation. Decades after K-129's loss, memory persisted through family and institution. Soviet naval policy had withheld details from crew families, providing only notification of deaths in operational service. After the Soviet Union's dissolution, Russian Federation authorities opened naval archives, allowing families to learn circumstances of K-129's sinking. The boat had imploded during patrol. Death was instantaneous. Recovery proved impossible at the time. These facts, though cold, provided closure. In 2003, the Russian Navy dedicated a memorial at Rybachi Naval Base, honoring K-129's crew. The plaque listed all 83 sailors by name, rank, and age. Most were in their 20s. The oldest officer was 43. Families attended the ceremony, placing flowers beneath the plaque. Veterans of Soviet submarine service spoke, describing the courage required to patrol in ballistic missile boats, knowing that operational security meant families might never learn what happened if a boat was lost. K-129 embodied that sacrifice. American recognition came differently. In 2007, the CIA declassified additional Project Azorian documents, including photographs of the burial at sea for the 6 recovered sailors. These images showed American sailors rendering honors, a Soviet naval ensign draped over each shroud, and a chaplain reading committal prayers in Russian. The photographs demonstrated respect across adversarial lines, acknowledging shared recognition of service and sacrifice. Technical artifacts survived as well. Portions of the capture vehicle's structural framework remained in storage at a Navy facility in California. Engineers occasionally consulted the designs when developing new deep ocean systems. Glomar Explorer, converted to a drilling ship, operated commercially until 2015, when age and maintenance costs forced retirement. The ship was scrapped in China, though photographs preserved her distinctive profile, the towering derrick, the hull designed for impossible tasks. Academic interest endured. Universities offered courses examining Project Azorian as a case study in engineering, intelligence, and ethics. Students analyzed the operation's success and failures, debated its justification, and considered what it revealed about Cold War competition. The operation's technical achievements impressed engineers. Its intelligence values satisfied analysts. Its ethical implications challenged philosophers. K-129 had become a lens through which multiple disciplines examined the intersection of technology, secrecy, and strategy. For submariners on both sides, K-129 served as a reminder of their profession's inherent risks. Submarines operate in an unforgiving environment where small failures cascade into catastrophic losses. The Cold War added strategic pressure. Boats on deterrent patrol carried weapons capable of destroying cities, and their crews accepted the possibility of never returning. K-129's crew joined a long list of submariners lost at sea, their service recognized by those who understood the unique demands of underwater warfare. More than 5 decades after K-129 vanished, the submarine's aft section still rests on the Pacific floor. Sonar surveys occasionally image the wreckage, a dark mass on otherwise featureless seabed, corroding slowly in cold, high-pressure darkness. No further recovery attempts have been made. The technical challenges that nearly defeated Project Azorian remain formidable, and the intelligence value no longer justifies expense. K-129 will likely remain where she lies indefinitely, a permanent monument to Cold War tensions and technological limits. The submarine's loss prompted questions never fully answered. What caused the initial failure? Soviet investigators concluded battery explosion, but no direct evidence survived. American analysts proposed alternative theories: collision with an underwater obstacle, reactor accident, even sabotage. Without examining the aft section, still on the seabed, definitive cause remains speculative. Each theory fits available facts, yet none can be confirmed. Why did emergency systems fail? K-129 carried distress buoys designed to release automatically at excessive depth. None surfaced. Either the buoys malfunctioned, or the submarine imploded too rapidly for automatic systems to activate. The latter explanation seems more probable. SOSUS recordings suggest catastrophic implosion over seconds, not minutes. Crew would have had no time to react, let alone deploy emergency equipment. What became of the intelligence recovered? CIA documents remain partially classified. Declassified portions confirm that code machines and missile technology provided significant insights, but specific details stay protected. Analysts assume the intelligence shaped US strategic assessments throughout the 1970s and 80s, informing arms control negotiations and defense planning. The full scope remains known only to those with appropriate clearances. Will K-129's reactor eventually leak? Monitoring continues, though infrequently. Oceanographic surveys in 2010 found radiation levels unchanged from 1980s measurements. Models predict containment will hold until mid-century, when corrosion may breach primary barriers. Even then, release would be gradual, and abyssal currents would disperse radioactivity across vast ocean volume, minimizing concentration. Environmental impact appears manageable, though monitoring will continue. The human dimension persists. 83 families lost fathers, sons, brothers. They received belated recognition only after the Soviet Union's dissolution. For decades, K-129's crew existed in classified silence, their sacrifice unacknowledged publicly. The memorial at Ribashi corrected that absence, ensuring their names endure. Project Azorian demonstrated audacity and ingenuity, but also costs, financial, diplomatic, and ethical. The operation recovered valuable intelligence at extraordinary expense, violated implicit norms protecting military graves, and created precedents with uncertain implications. Whether history judges its success or folly depends on values assigned to intelligence, secrecy, and respect for the dead. K-129 remains on the ocean floor. The coordinates are known, the depth charted, the wreckage imaged. But questions persist, answers stay classified, and 83 sailors rest in permanent darkness beneath the Pacific. Their submarine, once a symbol of deterrence, became an artifact of competition, then finally a memorial to the Cold War's human cost. The numbers tell one story: depth, temperature, activity. The names on the memorial tell another.